The air corridor wasn't supposed to collapse. Not in peacetime. Not with a full squadron watching over it. But in less than 60 seconds, every aircraft lost guidance, every radar froze, and the sky above the valley turned into an electronic minefield no jet could cross. Except one. You're watching Warthog Valor Stories, home of impossible missions, forgotten heroes, and pilots who don't turn back when every system fails. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? The operation started like any other high-altitude escort. Clean skies, stable frequencies, and a protected air corridor carved through contested airspace by layers of surveillance and electronic shielding. It was supposed to be routine, the safest route on the map, the kind of mission even rookies could babysit without breaking a sweat. Then the lights blinked. It began with a tremor across the comms panel, one tiny fluctuation, small enough to dismiss, but Major Kara Holt didn't dismiss things. She'd flown too many missions where one flicker meant everything was about to go wrong. She tapped the console once, watching the signal indicator dance erratically. "Control, Hog 2 checking. Do you copy?" Silence. Not static, not distortion, just dead air. She glanced to her right. 3 F-16s in formation suddenly drifted out of alignment, their noses wagging like they were fighting invisible hands. One pilot banked sharply, overcorrected, then yanked back as if his instruments were lying to him. Kara's jaw locked. Her A-10, old, ugly, and honest, held steady. Then the valley below them flickered. Every radar source feeding the corridor blinked off at once. Not degraded, not jammed, gone. Within seconds, warnings lit up the cockpits of every advanced jet in the squadron. Navigation fault, sensor mismatch, EW interference critical. The F-16s broke formation, each one attempting to retreat before the corridor fully collapsed into unreadable airspace. "Halt! Fall back!" Control finally snapped through a fractured channel. "The EW field is spreading. Get out of there before it locks you in." Her A-10's analog dials barely twitched. No digital panic, no frozen maps, no distorted flight cues. Just the steady hum of a machine built for clarity in chaos. Below, the valley shimmered in unnatural waves. Electronic warfare signatures rolled upward like heat distortion. The corridor, their one safe passage, was disintegrating minute by minute. Kara didn't turn back. If the corridor fully collapsed, the transport convoy on the far side would be trapped with zero air cover. And the signatures crawling across the valley floor told her whoever triggered this wanted exactly that. She banked alone into the failing airspace. Above her, jets fled. Below her, something unseen surged in the electronic dark. Kara didn't know who unleashed the EW storm, but she knew they were waiting for the moment every modern aircraft abandoned the sky. And as she descended into the corridor's failing heart, her receiver picked up something impossible. A targeting lock coming from a position no radar could detect.
The targeting alert came through her headset as a single sharp tone, clean, unmistakable, and absolutely impossible. The entire valley's radar grid had collapsed. Every sensor node feeding the air corridor was dead. The squadron's advanced jets couldn't even see each other, let alone detect a threat on the valley floor. But something down there had her locked. Kara steadied her breath and dropped lower, letting the hogs settle into the unstable air where the electronic distortion was thickest. The landscape flickered in strange waves, as if the valley itself was breathing. Her canopy glass shimmered with interference, her HUD flickered uselessly. Only the old analog dials stayed calm, lit by the soft glow of reliable machinery. She scanned the ground. Nothing. No vehicles, no signatures, no heat bloom. Whoever was aiming at her wasn't using anything the Air Force knew how to track. She rolled left to break the lock. It stayed. She rolled right. Still there. It followed her, like a shadow with intent. "Holt, abort! Repeat, abort!" A voice crackled through, fractured and fading. "Unknown emitter has you. Can't identify. Corridor unstable." Then silence swallowed the channel again. Kara clenched her jaw. If she pulled out now, the convoy waiting beyond the valley would be completely blind and undefended. Whatever force had triggered this electronic blackout clearly wanted the modern jets gone. And now that they were, only her A-10 remained inside the kill zone. She didn't climb. She pushed deeper. The air thickened around her as she passed over the first ridge. Distortion rippled across her wings like invisible hands dragging along the metal. The hog shook violently for 3 seconds, then stabilized as she dropped under the interference layer. And that's when she finally saw something move. A faint glint near a rock outcrop, too small to be a vehicle, too steady to be debris. Something metallic, positioned deliberately at the edge of the valley floor. Then another glint, farther left. Then a third, almost hidden in shadow. Kara narrowed her eyes. Tripods. 3 of them. But not like any launch platforms she recognized. Their surfaces pulsed with faint blue light, synchronized in a slow heartbeat rhythm. As she banked to get a closer look, the targeting lock snapped tighter, coming from all 3 positions at once. They weren't missiles, not yet. They were scanning her, studying her, waiting. "Okay, so that's new," she whispered. She dove lower to break their line of sight, but the lock didn't break. It traveled with her, adjusting instantly, as though the devices predicted her movement before she made it. Something advanced was happening here. Something engineered to defeat jets far more modern than her hog. But whoever designed this tech hadn't tested it against a pilot who flew by instinct, not sensors. Kara skimmed the valley floor, dust spraying up behind her. The mountains loomed on both sides like walls closing in. She passed the first tripod, banking sharply to inspect it. It turned. Not physically. Its electronic core rotated, tracking her like an eye. A chill slid down her spine. This wasn't just EW interference. It was an active system, one that reacted, adapted, and hunted. As she cleared the ridge, the lock suddenly vanished. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. Then all 3 tripods fired at once. They didn't launch missiles. They launched something the A-10 had never been tested against. A web of invisible energy streaked across the valley, snapping shut around the hog like a trap designed to tear aircraft out of the sky. The flash wasn't visible, only the effect was. One moment the air was clear, the next it shimmered with thin, crackling lines that bent the sunlight like heated glass. The 3 tripods had fired in perfect unison, projecting a wide lattice across the valley, a web of distortion that pulsed with electrical force. Kara felt it before she saw it. The hog bucked sideways, as if struck by a fist of compressed air. Her altimeter spun once, glitched, and froze. The control stick vibrated violently under her grip. Whatever they fired, it wasn't a missile. It was a field, and she was inside it. She pushed the throttle forward, but the hog resisted, dragged backward by invisible tension. The air thickened around her, the engine straining as though she were flying into a storm made of static. The A-10 wasn't built for speed, but it was built for something these devices didn't understand: brute strength. She dropped altitude, letting gravity help. The hog punched through the lower edge of the field, sparks flickering across the canopy like tiny bursts of lightning. The web flexed, warped,
then tore in one section as she forced her way out. She leveled off, breathing hard. Not missiles, not radar, not jammers. This was active capture tech, the kind of system designed in labs that didn't officially exist. "Holt, come in! Holt, do you copy?" A broken voice leaked through the static. "Still here and still flying." She climbed to gain perspective, but the moment she rose above ridge height, the tripods turned again, each one rotating its glowing core toward her with mechanical precision. Blue light intensified. They were charging for a second shot. Kara pulled left, using the canyon mouth as cover. If she stayed low, the ridges blocked their projection arc. If she climbed, she'd be trapped again. She needed to disable at least one of them before they triangulated another field. But she had a bigger problem. A second signal pinged on her analog receiver, weak but distinct, farther down the valley. Not hostile, not a lock, a distress beacon. The convoy. They were still alive, but they were moving, running from something. Kara cursed quietly. If she didn't neutralize the tripods, they'd collapse the corridor completely and cut off the convoy's escape route. But if she ignored the beacon, whatever chased them would reach them first. Two problems. One pilot, one aircraft. She glanced at the closest tripod, glowing brighter, preparing to fire. Its power core pulsed like a heartbeat, accelerating towards something catastrophic. She chose fast. "Fine," she said, tightening her grip. "We start with you." Kara dropped into a low dive, hugging the valley floor so tightly the dust blasted in a long trail behind her. The tripods adjusted instantly, their cores turning like mechanical eyes tracking prey. At the last second, she pulled up just enough to clear a rock outcrop and lined up a brief firing window. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 spat a tight burst that tore through the nearest tripod. Metal split, the blue core ruptured, collapsing in a shower of sparks that lit the valley floor like a dying star. The targeting lock vanished, but only from one direction. The other two adjusted immediately, cores brightening, preparing to project again. She'd destroyed one, but the next trap would be twice as strong, and she was flying straight toward its activation line. The remaining tripods fired together, and a new, denser wave surged across the valley, slamming into the hog before she had time to turn. The second wave hit harder than the first. Kara felt it in the bones of the aircraft before the sensors reacted, an invisible force slamming into the hog and shoving it sideways. The canopy glass warped with faint ripples as the field thickened around her, compressing the air until the engine strained against it. She pushed the throttle forward, but acceleration felt sluggish, like flying through syrup charged with electricity. This trap was stronger. The remaining two tripods weren't just projecting a net. They were syncing the frequencies to create a moving barrier. The field twisted, adjusting its shape to match her flight path. Modern jets would have been immobilized instantly. But the hog's analog guts kept responding, fighting the pressure inch by inch. Kara dipped the nose, forcing the aircraft into a shallow descent. The field tried to drag her upward, its force gripping the tail like a claw, but the hog's weight and low-speed authority worked in her favor. She skimmed the ground, letting the earth disrupt part of the projection. The field thinned slightly, just enough to buy time. She scanned the valley for angles. The tripods had positioned themselves in a perfect triangle, each covering the other's blind spots. That meant she couldn't approach the second device head-on. She'd have to strike from the one direction they hadn't accounted for, the narrow trench running along the valley floor. She banked low, almost scraping the hog's belly against the dirt. Dust erupted behind her in a long plume. The field pressed in tighter, trying to force her upward, but she kept the aircraft low enough that the rock formations absorbed some of the distortion. The hog shook, but it held. The next pulse hit,
pushing her nose toward a sharp ridge. Kara countered with a rudder kick, rolling with controlled precision until she slipped through a narrow gap between two broken pillars of stone. The field broke for a moment, disrupted by terrain. That was her opening. She pulled up into a tight arc, the second tripod coming into view through the dust. Its core glowed brighter than before, the blue pulse almost white as it neared full charge. If she waited for it to fire again, the hog wouldn't muscle its way out a second time. She lined up her shot quickly. No sensor, no lock, just instinct and experience. She fired a short, concentrated burst. The GAU-8's rounds tore into the device, punching through its frame and rupturing the core. A flash of blue-white light burst outward, scattering pieces of metal across the valley. The air around her loosened at once, the invisible pressure lifting as the field collapsed. Only one tripod remained, and it was already rotating toward her, charging at a pace she hadn't seen from the others. The last device wasn't just tracking her, it was predicting her. Its pulse frequency accelerated, narrowing into a single focused beam rather than a wide field. This one wasn't designed to trap her. It was designed to destroy the hog outright. Her receiver twitched with a new warning, an unfamiliar tone she'd never heard from an A-10 in her entire career. Whatever the last device was powering up, it wasn't electronic capture anymore. It was something meant to destroy the hog before she ever saw the convoy. And as the beam locked onto her canopy, the final tripod unleashed a surge, bright enough to turn the valley floor white. The valley went white for a split second, not from an explosion, but from a focused surge that burned across the air like a horizontal lightning strike. Kara flinched as the canopy glass flashed, then darkened automatically. The hog rattled as if someone had slapped the fuselage with a steel sheet. This wasn't the wide-area distortion the previous tripods projected. This was a concentrated energy burst aimed directly at her cockpit. The warning tone in her headset continued, steady, urgent, nothing like any A-10 alarm she had ever heard. She stabilized the hog, checked her gauges, and found something unsettling. Her instruments were still alive. Whatever the device fired was designed to blind and burn, not disable her systems. It was trying to kill the pilot, not the plane. She dropped altitude to break line of sight, but the tripod adjusted instantly, pivoting on a reinforced base, tracking her descent with mechanical precision. Its core pulsed in a tight rhythm, charging for another beam. The first wasn't meant to destroy her. It was meant to force her into a predictable direction. The second would be timed to hit her when she corrected. They weren't improvising. They were controlling the battlefield.
Kara leveled out low over the valley floor, dust clouds rising behind her. Her analog receiver twitched with erratic signals, short pulses that weren't targeting locks, but telemetry. The device was reading her flight behavior. It was adapting. She needed to think faster than the system analyzing her movements. She narrowed her eyes at the terrain ahead. The valley widened briefly before tightening again into a winding choke point. If she could force the tripod to fire through a narrowing section, the beam might strike the rock walls and overload itself. But she'd have to lure it, give it a shot worth taking. Kara pulled back on the throttle slightly, letting her speed drop just enough for the tripod's algorithm to interpret it as a climb. The core brightened behind her. Good. She kept it steady, then rose smoothly toward the canyon lip. The tripod fired again. A lance of searing energy cut through the sky and hit the ridge inches below her right wing. The blast carved a molten trench in the stone as sharp fragments hit the underside of the hog, pinging like metal hail. The device was getting faster, more accurate. She rolled left and dove into the canyon throat, using the pillars as cover. The tripod adjusted again, its core flickering through the gaps like an artificial eye searching for a killing angle. The deeper she flew, the narrower the turning radius would be, for both her and the beam. She reached the perfect spot, a tight S-curve with barely enough clearance for the hog's wings. If the tripod fired now, the beam would rebound inside the canyon walls like a trapped flash and overload its own emitter. Kara steadied herself, heart pounding, but movements calm. She rose just enough to give the device a clean visual angle. The core on the ridge burned white. "Come on, take it," she said quietly. The tripod fired. A blast of condensed energy shot straight toward her. Kara snapped the hog sideways, rolling into the turn at the last possible second. The beam missed her canopy by inches, struck the inside cliff face, and shattered into wild arcs that ricocheted in every direction. The canyon lit up like a storm in a sealed chamber. The feedback slammed back into the tripod. Its core overloaded in a burst of blue fire. The device tore itself apart on the ridge, exploding in fragments that rained down the slope. Kara pulled out of the turn, dust swirling behind her. The valley was finally clear, but the distress beacon ahead pulsed sharply again, faster than before. The convoy wasn't just running, they were being driven. Someone was pushing them toward a specific point in the valley, forcing Kara into a trap bigger than the devices she'd destroyed. And as she accelerated toward their signal, a dark plume rose on the horizon, the unmistakable smoke of vehicles under attack.
The launcher on the northern ridge finished its rotation with slow mechanical certainty. It wasn't a tripod, it wasn't an ambush team. It was the real weapon, the one all the electronic traps had been buying time for. Its barrel assembly glowed with a white core that screamed of engineered precision. Whatever it was meant to hit, it wasn't gonna miss. Kara climbed for an angle, but the machine tracked her smoothly, matching every correction with unnerving ease. The hog's airflow sensors chimed in warning. She was pushing the airframe hard, edging into a zone where maneuvering was limited and mistakes became permanent. Below, the convoy scrambled behind the burned-out vehicles she had disabled earlier. If that launcher fired, the beam would slice through her and then plunge straight into the valley floor. She couldn't let it charge fully. She only had one option: strike before it stabilized. She dropped altitude in a tight roll, taking the hog along the valley wall and using every jutting rock shelf as partial cover. Dust trailed behind her, the engine straining as she forced speed out of a machine not built for sprinting. The launcher brightened again, a steady rise toward firing readiness. "Almost there," she muttered, lining up the only attack angle she'd get. She pulled the hog upward into a shallow climb. It put her directly in the launcher's line of fire, but also gave her a clear shot at its support structure. She didn't need to destroy the weapon. She only needed to destabilize it. The core flared. She fired. A short, perfectly timed GAA-8 burst slammed into the base of the platform. Steel fractured. The machine wobbled, trying to compensate. And then in the same second, it fired. Because of the damaged support, the barrel kicked off axis by only a few degrees, but it was enough. The beam tore harmlessly across open sky instead of through her cockpit. The surge overloaded the platform, sending arcs of electricity through its frame before the entire structure collapsed backward in a cascade of sparks and dust. The valley fell still. Kara circled once, checking for movement. The tripods were destroyed, the assault teams were broken, the launcher was gone, and for the first time since the corridor collapsed, her radio cleared of interference. "Command, this is Holt. Threat eliminated. Convoy secure." The reply came through sharp and full of breath. "Holt, the entire corridor just lit back up.
Bring the hog home. She banked toward open sky, the first clean sunlight breaking through the fading haze. The A-10's gauges glowed steady, no glitches, no distortion, just the heartbeat of a machine that survived because its pilot refused to turn back. Radar feeds returned, sensors rebooted, and the airspace rebuilt itself. But none of it mattered. The only aircraft that made the corridor safe again was the one that never needed any of it.